and welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we're going to be looking at the Adder or the Puma, depending on which side of the border you're on. One's a big cat, the other one's a small snake, but in the end it's a, light mech that is quite scary, especially since it can easily sneak by various things being so small. It's a bit of a surprising machine in terms of how much firepower it packs in a tiny little package in the end. Especially when you start shooting at it, because it's just too low to easily be it. It's quite fun for that. So let's get into it. So the original Adder comes from Clan Star Adder. It's a clan that we haven't heard a whole lot about, mostly because they've kept into clan space and basically kicked everybody out. They're kind of a bunch of assholes for that, to be quite honest. When the invasion was getting prepared, basically, they brought out the Adder as a light mech to fight the Inner Sphere and to train against, because they thought that it would be a great machine to emulate the various things the Inner Sphere could do with their own machines. As an aggressor, I can understand why you would use the Adder that way, but it's a little bit small and a little bit under-armored compared to the standard mechs of the day, which would have been your Centurions, Enforcers, Griffin, Shadowhawk, Wolverines, the classics there. A lot of medium mechs were being used during the Succession War and the late Succession War era. It was so successful, however, that every other clan bid for it and tried to get it through trials, through trades, through all sorts of things, and Clan Star Adder probably made a LT profit off of the design, even though they couldn't use it themselves during the invasion. To be quite honest, by 3045, as the invasion was truly ramping up, even though they didn't quite know it yet, everybody had the Adder, usually in larger number than Clan Star Adder had themselves. The four invading clans, Wolves, Ghost Bear, Smoke Jaguar, and Jade Falcon, slammed into the Inner Sphere, bringing a whole lot of Adders with them, and they served admirably. I know a lot of pilots at the time, if you look at various records, if you look at gun cam footage, if you look at journals, that will tell you that they were actually more scared of the Adder than some of the larger clan mechs, especially the Hellbringer, let's be honest. Comstar, of course, included it in their technical readout 3050, and there was not really any other competition here in that 35-ton range that was used enough as an omni-mech for them to include anything else, unlike, let's say, the Arctic Cheetah versus the Kit Fox, as an example. While the Adder was and still is a fantastic mech, both Clan Wolf and Clan Jade Falcon looked at the base design and decided to build their own mech during the invasion, after the invasion, in that general period, to try to replace it. The Wolves went with a larger Pouncer at 40 ton, which was meant to be a more mobile version of the Adder. It adds jump jet to the base design, which is a silly thing to do on an Omni-Mech to begin with. In terms of firepower, it's quite comparable and performs fairly well. On the other hand, the Falcon built the Cougar, leaning into the Inner Sphere codename there, which was a slower, less well-armored counterpart to the Adder, which managed to pack even more guns because the Adder doesn't pack enough, I guess. I'm not quite sure if those two are really that fantastic, let's say, compared to the Adder, which everybody uses and everybody keeps using. Those two have been around and are around, and we'll talk about them at some point for sure. Even with those two side design meant to replace it, the Adder is still popular enough in the Inner Sphere and the Homeworld clans, at least from what we know of them, that it's still in full production. The Adder was built by Clan Wolf in Exile at Battletech on Donegal, which means nowadays, with Donegal being back in the hands of the Lyran Commonwealth, you can probably expect those things to be part of the Lyran military and in various forms. I'm not sure if they're going to have their own pod setups. I mean, the Adder is quite capable of carrying all sorts of things. We will see when that happens, or if that happens in the future. If I were the Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces, I would lean into having access to that technology. And now there's the issue with having too large of an image and too much text. It happens when I try to do those things every once in a while. So the Adder is a 35-ton mech at the top end of the curve of light mechs, and it's fast enough in that weight range with a top speed of 96 kilometers per hour or so using a 210 XL engine, compared to almost all light mechs of the era. Let's say if you look on the inner sphere side of the border, this is going to be as fast as it gets. You might have jump jets to increase mobility. You have those odd things like the Jenner that goes a little bit faster and jumps, but is armored with, thoughts and prayers. So this one here is right in the middle of that curve there. The bones are made of endo steel, so you save more weight that way, and the skin is made of 6 tons of ferrofibrous plates, which is quite sufficient on a 35-ton mech. You're not going to be brawling with heavy mechs. You're not going to be getting in the face of larger, medium mechs very close by. Try to keep your distance in your Adder, but 6 tons of ferro is usually enough on a light mech, I would say. The nose mounts a fixed flamer for some odd reason. It is great against tank, it's great against infantry, but it's odd that it's hard mounted in, and you still get 16 tons of pod space, almost half your weight. As I said earlier, the body's low to the ground. You're going to be able to deflect and dodge some shots just because of that, and you're able to sneak into different things being a tiny little boy. Prime configuration was actually meant to be able to engage the 275 Mafia and beat them into submission. You're a bit less mobile because you don't have jump jets, but you're a bit faster on the ground, so that kind of evens out. And your main weapon, well, you've got a pair of ERPPCs, and not the inner sphere kind. Those are the good clan ERPPCs. You can basically head cap whatever with that thing and keep going. It's going to be devastating in long-range engagements, but of course you don't have that many each thing, so you're probably going to have to volley fire them in order to keep you down. You get a targeting computer on top of that to make sure that every shot will count. Truly, it's a simple little design that's going to be able to punch so much higher than its weight range just because of that weapon setup. There's tons of different variants of the Adder, but this one ends up being used by just about everyone at just about every time, and it's always going to be successful. As usual, your Tango configuration is a revamp of the original, and for the Adder, what they did, they put a capacitor on each of those ERPPCs, which will slow down your fire. You're basically going to have to fire one at a time, but it gives you more single punch. If you decide to go with a double shot of those, you're probably going to shut down or going to have some issues. So they add an extra heat sink in, and they add the coolest thing ever, a coolant pod, just to make sure you stay cool. I'm not 100% sold on that one. I think I prefer the original. And here's the trainer. Well, literally what I trained on. My granddad captured a Puma back in the days during Operation Bulldog and brought it home. And that's what me and my brother learned how to pilot and shoot missiles out of. This one's meant to be a LRM boat with a pair of 20 rack LRM in the arms and 4 tons of reload for constant bombardments. You get a pair of small pulse laser to help out against infantry, and if you run out of ammo or if anything gets close by, it works fairly well. The one we had didn't have those fancy 20 rack LRMs in the arms, though they were basic inner sphere 10 racks, more or less hard bolted on. The thing worked with thoughts and prayers, but it taught me at least how to shoot LRMs and pilot the much larger Archer in the future. I still have a very soft spot for this particular configuration, and as you can tell, with the Puma in general. Charlie configuration follows in those footsteps with a pair of 15 rack LRM rather than the larger 20s. With the saved weight, you put a NARC missile beacon on there so you can mark people for other missile launchers. So if you have a Charlie and a pair of Alphas, things are going to go very poorly for your opponent. Once you run out of ammo, even though you got a decent amount of reloads on there. You still have a medium pulse laser as a backup weapon, which is quite functional. Between this one and the Alpha, it's one of those situations where you'll have one of those, multiple Alphas, or multiple other mechs with missile racks, and this one's going to go and mark. It works really well. Echo's another one that is a missile boat, but this one I never personally piloted. This one actually used a pair of advanced tactical missile launcher, 9 tubes. So you have 4 tons of ammo, so you can easily load a good variety of the 3 standard rounds for ATMs. So extended range, standards, or eye explosives. Eye explosives being very nice if you're going to get close by to someone. But with an adder, maybe you'll be loading more of that standard mid-range loadout. Against things that get close by, you get 4 micropulse lasers, which is okay against infantry, but I personally think swapping those for a pair of regular small pulse lasers, like on the Alpha, would be a better trade. It's pods. It's things that can easily be swapped in and out. It also depends on what you have available on hand. To finish off the missile boat configuration, Lima is a fairly recent one using a pair of Streak LRM-5s with 1 ton of ammo for each. Streak LRMs are okay, but I wouldn't go with a Streak LRM-5 personally. It's way too small. You get an ER medium laser as well on each side torso and an ECM to protect you against electronic warfare equipment, and jump jets allowing you to jump 180 meters. It tries to do a whole lot of things, and it just won't do any of those things particularly well. So I'm not sure Lima is one where I would put a whole lot of trust into when you've got better options with Charlie, Alpha, or even the Prime. Switching gear, we're going to be looking at some Gun Hunters here with Bravo configuration, which was technically built based on the reports from the Wolf Dragoon when they were still sending information to their clan overlords. This one is probably meant to really hunt down those 275 Mafia mechs by using weapons that are quite similar to it as well. Get an LB5X autocannon or an Ultra AC5 depending on what the pilot would really want to have on one side, and a large pulse laser on the other, giving you very good medium to long range punch, and you get a single ton of reload on that LBX, so you have to pick between clusters or slugs. Also have a pair of almost large lasers known as ER medium lasers to close the deal, making this quite capable of taking out just about anything in its weight range, and probably bigger as well. Delta configuration is quite similar, using an Ultra AC5 and an ER large laser instead. Again, it can probably fight a mafiosi on equal level, even though it has less armor. It's a little bit lighter, and it can't jump. Really, if you have to get into melee range with your adder, probably not the best mech to do that with. Delta also features a pair of 2-tube Streak SRMs, which will be very decent against armor, or to exploit holes that you've made in the enemy's armor as well. Hotel configuration is your typical heavy laser boat, and this time it mounts a pair of heavy large lasers, kind of reminiscent of our original setup of twin ERPPCs. Even more so, you get a targeting computer on there to compensate for the inaccuracies of the heavy large lasers, and it becomes doubly good once you can replace those with improved heavy large lasers. Of course, improved heavy large lasers have a tendency to blow up if they're it, so it's a little bit more risky to do that, but the increase in accuracy on improved lasers compared to regular heavy lasers is kind of worth it, really. Since a pair of heavy large laser is going to run you stupidly hot, you are going to have 6 extra double heat sinks to compensate, which makes it, once again, you'll have to volley fire, but they're going to be pretty good there. One of the issues here is that heavy large lasers don't have that much range compared to most clan weapons, so you are going to have to get into somewhat brawling range. And on a 35-ton mech, that can be risky, especially if you're trying to hunt down bigger mechs, because an assault mech getting close and kicking your leg off is always a possibility. India configuration is an improved medium laser boat, well, in a way. It only has 2 of them, 1 in each arm, with a backup of 2 ER medium lasers, so you do get medium range support there. Could you swap that for a whole lot of improved heavy medium lasers? Probably, but you're going to run really hot with that. And the design is kept symmetrical by having a 6 tube of SRM with a ton of ammo in each side torso. It's really meant to brawl. It's really meant to get close to things. As I've said earlier, this one I wouldn't bring against, much larger targets. Heavies and assault mechs probably would be threatened by something like that, but they can turn around and just squish you with their sheer size. Against other lights and against medium mechs, this is going to work fairly well, and you get an extra heat sinks to try to keep the whole heat situation down. Juliet configuration is for Joust rifle or something like that. The main weapon is an Hyper Assault Joust 20, which is a splendid weapon. Very good punch for its weight. You do have limited reloads on those normally, but you've got 3 tons of it for this one, so you're going to be able to stay in the fight fairly long, take out a whole lot of airplanes, VTOLs, and just shoot at other mechs at fairly long range. Against infantry and other threats, you get 4 anti-personnel Joust rifle, which gives you okay protection, decent range, decent damage. It's nothing fantastic, but okay enough, really. This one is very popular with Clan Elzors, which have invented the Hyper Assault Gauss weapons, so it kind of makes sense. Another fairly modern design Kilo configuration is meant to engage at range as somewhat of a sniper. The main gun is the ER Large Pulse Laser, which is a proprietary design of Clan Wolf, which gives you very good range, but it runs fairly odd and is not quite as accurate as a regular pulse laser. On the other arm, you get a rotary 2-class autocannon with a single ton of reload, which is a bit tight, but not that much. On a 35-ton mech, you should be fine. To protect you a little bit better, you get a laser anti-missile system, but with that ER Pulse Laser, it might run you a little bit hot if you have to defend yourself against a whole lot of missiles. I haven't messed with this one enough, personally, to give a clear assessment of it, but on paper, it'll function as that sniper that it is meant to be. Zerra configuration is an infantry killer, which is a bit weird because that's not what the Adder is meant to do generally. This one carries 16 machine guns overall, 3 in each arms, 10 in the torsos. Each are individually set up and not in an array, so you have to shoot each of those individually. For most pilots, it's not much of an issue. It allows you to control your ammo usage a little bit better. Machine guns generally not generating any excess heat for your mech means that you can easily shoot all of them all the time and you won't have much of an issue. You get 2 tons of ammo overall for this as well, which will mean that you can keep firing for quite some times. Against armored target, APCs, things like that would be bringing that infantry around, you get 4 medium pulse lasers, which is perfectly functional in that particular role and is going to be very accurate. You can basically turn this into a really nasty brawler really quickly. I do think it's fantastic in that particular role, and it can replace things like a Piranha if required. The Adder really isn't that fancy of an Omni-Mech. Most configuration actually wouldn't even be that fancy for standard battle mechs in the end. What it does is really bring you a strong package with tons of weapon in something that's small, fairly agile, and capable of being deployed just about everywhere. Most standard configuration are good to great. I don't think there's any of them that I would really ignore altogether, except maybe that one with Streak LRM5s, which are just terrible. But they will be able to serve as good trainers, as aggressors, support units, snipers, main assault unit in a lighter lance. You can literally do whatever you want with an Adder, and it's going to fit the bill. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.